Hey everyone, it's awesome to be here. I actually wanted to start with a quick little vision test. Is anyone out there able to read what this card says? Yeah, a couple of you see it. It's all right if you don't. This one's a little bit tricky. But in case you didn't, this is what it says, Blindspot. That's the title of my talk and the theme of what I'm talking about. This is what's known as an Ishihara plate test. It's a really common test for color blindness. The way it works is it uses a lot of randomized dots of different hues, but really similar values to test for color deficiencies in people. I found this really cool website where you can make your own plate tests. If you upload a little black and white image, it'll generate these for you, and I had a bit of fun. So I made a few others. Can you guys tell what this one is? This is my favorite dinosaur here, Triceratops. I think you guys should be able to recognize this one, maybe. I got to meet one of these guys at the zoo yesterday. Yeah, I'll have a link at the end of the presentation where you can go to this website and make some of these for your own if you feel like it. So yeah, I'm an art director in the animation industry. Some of the projects I've worked on are Disney's Big Hero 6. I was a visual development artist on the film. I also worked on Inside Out a little bit, again as a visual development artist. I made one of the video games in the movie Her with a couple of my friends. I've also done a couple of short animated films, like this promotional piece we did for Persol sunglasses. I've art directed a couple of TV shows, like the Powerpuff Girls. And I also worked on the most recent incarnation of the series Cosmos on Fox. So besides all that, I also happen to be colorblind. According to one test that I took, I have what's called strong protan color blindness, which affects about 1% of men and 0.2% of women in the world. I found my whole life, whenever I first tell people that I'm colorblind, you get a lot of pretty interesting questions. For some reason, one of the most common I get right away is, how do you match your socks? And that's a really easy one, just pattern socks. I've got them on today, never leave home without them. I'm not sure why that's one of the biggest dilemmas people imagine you might face as a colorblind person when they think about it. This is another one I get a lot. How do you tell when the stoplight's green? Pretty easy, green one's on the bottom. Although to me the green stoplight looks completely white. I don't see any color in it at all. Another common misconception you get is that you see in black and white. That's not true. I think people think that because of the word colorblind. Sounds like you're not able to see any color. Sometimes I think that'd be pretty awesome though if the whole world looked like Woody Allen's Manhattan or some other black and white film like that. And I actually didn't even know until I was researching for this presentation there actually is a really rare type of color blindness where you are not able to see any color at all, and it affects about 1 in 33,000 people or something like that. So that actually is a real issue for people. So what does the world look like to me? Basically, the simplest way to describe it is you just see fewer colors. Sometimes colors can blend together for me. When I see two objects next to each other, it can be extra hard for me to distinguish the colors. Typically, the easiest way to tell would be if the values were especially different. That's the whole reason that the Ishihara test works, is it's using really similar values, so it's a lot harder to see the differences in colors. Green and purple are the hardest colors for me to see. Green typically looks like yellow, purple looks like blue. To be a little more specific, this here is my arch nemesis, the Photoshop color picker. I've spent a lot of time just staring at this, not sure what I'm looking at. But if you look at the color bar there in the middle at the bottom, I can tell that's red. Then it goes up and kind of fades into this yellow. Then there's just a whole lot more yellow. Then this part is, I just call this the void. I don't see anything there. Then there's this big section of blue. And at the end, it just turns to red again. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Whoops. So, it's a little preview. So yeah, it's really interesting, but the way that I see color has completely transformed the way that I work as an artist, the way that I work with color. It's informed my philosophies about color and how I paint, and it's completely transformed my career and the path of my life. And I hope maybe this talk will give you guys a little bit of new perspective on color and maybe how it might apply to your own creative fields. So going way back to the beginning, I've always really enjoyed drawing from the time I was really young. This is some of my early work. I always really liked thinking about how things were built and how they work. Sometimes I would really like drawing these cross sections of buildings under construction, imagining how they were made. I also got to travel around to a lot of really cool places when I was a kid. This is us in Greece. Because my dad was an officer in the US Air Force. One time it even actually landed us in the middle of a war zone. This is us during a missile raid when we lived in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War. So it was a pretty interesting childhood, to say the least. I discovered my color blindness at a really young age. I think it must have been in kindergarten or so. I was coloring a picture of the Earth, and I made all the oceans purple and the land masses yellow. And I got into this argument with a girl who was sitting next to me in the class who insisted that I had used the wrong colors for the Earth. And in this case, I actually thought I was using the right colors. I just hadn't bothered to look at the labels on the crayons. But this is the earliest memory I have of being told that there was a right and wrong color for things. And I've been thinking a lot about this process of how we're introduced to color as children, and why we're told that there's wrong and right colors for things. And I've been rediscovering this process now that I have a 2-year-old son. I'm finding that children are really bombarded with a lot of color associations. He has this book, it's called Hello Baby Colors, and this book is just filled with all these really bold proclamations about what color things are. Like leaves are green, sun is yellow. And I wanted to talk about the leaf example a little bit. If you do a Google image search for leaves, it spits back tons of green leaves. And it doesn't seem like a crazy assumption to make. There are a lot of green leaves in the world. But I think it's a really overly simplistic way to think about how color works in our world. Because for starters, there's a lot of leaves that aren't green. It's actually really hard to get Google to send you images that aren't green leaves when you search for it. You have to really work on it. But the other thing about it is that when you talk about green leaves, it's only taking into account the local color of those leaves, which is the color of the object when it's not being affected by the color of light in the environment at all. And I think it's really important to consider that as an artist, because the light in the world can change the look and the feel of any scene that you're looking at. I was going to illustrate a little bit with this photo. Taking an example like this, if you look at this box in the center of the image, and you try to figure out what color that box might be, you kind of look at the whole image, you look at the way there's a lot of light over in the corner there, and it kind of seems like this building is being cast in a blue shadow. And so you look at that box, and your brain kind of makes this interpretation that that's probably a white box, that there's this blue shadow being cast onto it, and you remove that lighting information. I call this whole process corrective color. I'm sure there's a more technical term for it. But it's a really interesting process, because when you sample a color from that box from Photoshop, it's actually a pretty clear blue color. And so your brain has to take that information and go through a pretty interesting and sophisticated process to get to the conclusion that you're actually looking at a white box. My eyes try to do this the same as anyone else's. I just usually end up with the wrong conclusion. And this can actually result in some really tricky situations. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this dress. In case anyone isn't, this is a photo of a dress that went viral on the internet a while back. Half the people who saw it thought they were looking at a white and gold dress. Half the people who saw it thought they were looking at a blue and black dress. And this was the exact same process as what's happening in that other photo I showed you, where people's brains were making different interpretations about what the lighting situation was in this environment with the dress. And their brains were trying to make an interpretation and get to the actual correct color of the dress. Personally, I saw it as blue and black. This was one of the first times in my life I've ever actually been correct in a debate about what color something was. But if you think about it, whichever way you saw it, your brain was still making a pretty big interpretation. If you sample that stripe there in the center, it is like a dull, sort of a dull bluish color. But if you sample the part that's actually supposed to be black, it's like this weird kind of muddy brownish color. So either way you saw it, your brain was ignoring some information to give you the result that it thinks the object is. And this is when I realized this is like a pretty big realization in my career, because basically you can, if you can create a sense of a certain type of light in your work, people's brains are able to interpret it and see whatever color they want to see in the painting. So this allows me in my work to create a sense of some really warm sunlight or something that's changing the color of an environment. And people can look at it and basically see whatever they want, because your brains sort of reinterpret the image and try to find out what the real colors are. I wanted to talk about this one with the sun too, the yellow sun. This one really bothers me. Again, when you Google it, you get a lot of yellow suns back. But click into the next one. The sun is actually white. And it's really obvious when you look at it in photos from space, because sunlight is all colors mixed together. It's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, all of them come together, which makes pure white light. But it sort of looks yellow a lot of times on Earth. The sunlight does, because of the way our atmosphere scatters the wavelengths of the light differently. Basically, the long wavelength colors, or the short wavelength colors, green, blue, violet, get scattered out when they come into the atmosphere. And then the longer wavelength colors, which are red, orange, and yellow, come through, which gives the sunlight this yellowish kind of appearance. I'm not that smart. I did a lot of research on that. But if you look at the actual sun, even in this image, and you sample the center of it, it's pure white. And I've always thought it was a bit confusing that we call the sun itself yellow, because it's the light that's coming out of the sun that looks yellow. And I don't think there's very many times in our lives where we've looked at the sun without any eye protection. But if you ever catch it out of the corner of your eye, the sun is just blindingly white. So I always try to keep things like that in mind when I'm working. This is the last example from this book I really wanted to talk about. This one's really ridiculous, this white rain cloud. I mean, first of all, if you're going to make a generalization about a color for a rain cloud, I would have gone with gray, probably. But they went with white, so whatever. But second, clouds are gas, and they absorb the color of the sky. So basically, they can be any color imaginable. That's why we get all these crazy cloud colors during sunsets and everything. But I found that challenging people's perception of these learned colors that they've learned about since they were really young children can be pretty difficult. And people even will tie certain colors into emotions. Like, this is one I hear a lot. People associate happiness with blue skies, green grass, white clouds, yellow sun. I've even gotten this note during my career where someone would be looking at a painting that I had done and say, "We need this scene to look happier." And this is what they meant. They wanted to see a blue sky and green grass. But I think that's a really dangerous assumption to make as an artist, because that's not the only way that you can communicate happiness. And it's also, I think, simplifying color to too much of an extreme. Typical human eye can see around 1 to 2.4 million colors, but we only have names for a fraction of those colors. And so a lot of times in my work, what I really try to do is create new emotional color associations. And maybe for me, happiness is a purple sky with paint grass or any number of things. But basically, I've tried to embrace this philosophy that there are no wrong or right colors, and to work more emotionally and less logically, where you're thinking, oh, I know that the sky is blue because that's what I was told, and just being a lot more free in how I work. So starting out in my career, I really didn't see illustration or art direction as ever being a viable career option for me because of the color blindness. And this was kind of confirmed by some people who I talked to really on in my career. One guy who I showed my work to, he found out I was colorblind, and he was like, if you're really dead set on being an illustrator, maybe just focus on design. You know, you can work in black and white, you can be like the greatest designer ever, but you're not going to be a concept artist or anything like that because you have to be able to see color to do that. But it was sort of uncontrollable. I just felt like I really wanted to do this, and even though that stuff was really discouraging, I thought I've got to try to pursue this anyway. And some people I talked to were a lot more encouraging. One of the first art directors that I ever worked with, when he found out I was colorblind, he taught me this method of painting where I would paint in black and white, and then thanks to all the digital magic of Photoshop, I would add the color afterwards. And this was a real breakthrough for me, and I used this method for years, painting in black and white, and then adding color, and it really sort of freed me up to just learn how to paint, learn how to capture light, learn how to work with value, and create good compositions, and how to direct your eye through an image without all of the added stress of muddling up my colors and getting lost in all of that work. So it was really helpful for quite a while, but eventually it kind of started to feel like it was becoming a crutch, and I was feeling more and more this building fear of that I was going to be found out, that somebody was going to out me and be like, that dude's colorblind, and that it was going to ruin my career or any number of horrible things. And I even had these confidants, like trusted friends who I could go to if someone gave me a note like, hey, those mountains are green and we need them to be blue, and I'd go to them and be like, where are the green mountains? I don't remember putting any green mountains in. And just building up this network and all these safety nets to help me through it. And it was really tough. By the time I decided I really wanted to pursue illustration as a career, I went through about 1.5 years of unemployment before I could start to get a few scattered jobs here and there. But one of the biggest breakthroughs came for me in 2008 when a guy named Pete Candeland from Passion Pictures asked me to work on this commercial for the Beijing Olympics on BBC. And he specifically asked me to paint the color script for this commercial. And it felt like this ruse that I'd been perpetrating on society for years was finally up. Like, this was where everyone was going to find me out, and my career would be over and all this stuff. But it was such a big opportunity. There was no way I could turn it down. And for the first time in years, I had to actually paint something in color. There was no way that I could do this in black and white and add color afterwards. So it was this massive push outside of my comfort zone, away from this safety net and all these things that I've been building up for years. And it's just one of those kind of big moments in your life you need to really get yourself out of a pattern and try something new. And luckily in this case, it worked out fine. Pete was really helpful and appreciative of the work that I did. And from that point on, I sort of had this feeling of just letting go of everything, like letting go of all the preconceptions I'd had since I was a child about what color things were supposed to be or how you're supposed to work with color. And this is sort of where I feel like my style really started to develop, and I think this is where a lot of people's styles start to develop, is when you're able to sort of embrace all of these weird quirks about yourself and just work in a way that's natural to you, and just owning up to your own personal insecurities, admitting maybe I'm not so good at this thing, but I am good at this thing, and so that makes up for that. And just finding a way to embrace those weaknesses and find a way to turn them into strengths. Another really big thing for me is just collaborating with other people. because a lot of times you can find there's something that you're not that great at and someone else is really good at it, and when you work together, it can create a more powerful result. And basically, I found the more true your work is to who you are, the more people will appreciate it, because it's more personal, and people just tend to respond to that. And it can be really scary to sort of admit who you are and show this side of yourself to the world, like show them all of your weaknesses and all of your insecurities, especially if people have been judgmental in the past about it. But I found that it always just seems to work out for the best when you can be honest about it. So how do I actually work with color now? Well, I rely a lot on photo reference. And anytime I start a new piece, the first thing I do is go on Google Images and do about an hour of research, pulling photos both for design and for color. And I'll bring them into Photoshop and use the eyedropper tool to pick out some interesting colors. And I also really focus on just using really limited, simplified palettes. I typically kind of max out around 6 to 8 colors. I'll get a good shadow color, a couple good midtones, and a highlight color. And they're typically sort of organized by value because it's easier for me to keep them separated that way. But interestingly, this has become one of the things people respond to the most about my work. They like the kind of graphic look that these simplified palettes lend to my work. And so it's just interesting to see how that's all come around that way. I also always try to work from small to big. I always start with a really rough, quick little color key to kind of work everything out. And because I work in film and I deal with a lot of sequences of images, I've discovered that when you string a whole bunch of images that each have their own simple palettes, and then when you string them all together, you can actually create some more complicated and interesting spectrums of color in the film. But yeah, I think being open about the color blindness, both with the people I work with and with myself, has just changed absolutely everything for me. That there was a point in my life where I worried that admitting I was colorblind would turn me into an outcast or ruin my career or any number of things, but I've found that being honest about it has actually really united me with people. And I've realized that people enjoy art because it's somebody's unique perspective on the world that they're sharing with you. And every single one of us sees the world differently. Some people see the world differently because of where they come from or things that they've experienced in their life. And some people see it differently because of a disability like color blindness or any number of things like that. But at the end of the day, every one of us has a unique perspective to share, and I would encourage each of you to find what yours is and share it with the world. And to end, I wanted to share this project I completed this year. It's a short film I did with some friends, and I think this is maybe the closest to showing my view of the world, how I see things, and I really hope that you guys enjoy it. Thanks a lot, guys. I've got some contact info there, and then the link if you guys feel like making any of those colorblind tests for yourself. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Kevin, absolutely, seriously awesome. You have won over everyone on the internet who have fallen in love. I'm just going to read one tweet and show it to Kevin. This was my favourite one. How can you not fall in love with Kevin Dart? Funny, interesting, and oh my God, he does Disney. There's a little GIF. The animated GIF makes the thing.
Awesome.
Kevin, thanks so much for coming and talking to us. And then a lot of people, what really a lot of people are tweeting about is that you've made them rethink colour. You've just really, and the other one is that, do you like his work? Yeah. So I
don't like it.
I got one question for you, Kevin. The other night, Tuesday night, we had a speakers' dinner. All the speakers, we got together, we went and had a drink and some dinner and food, and it was awesome. But before we went, we were at the office, the Adobe office here in Sydney, and Eric Johansson and Kevin were there, and there's a table tennis table. And they both said, oh, hey, we had a bit of time to kill, do you want to play? And they started playing, and at the beginning, for the first little bit, it was like super friendly, and it was, oh, no, oh, cool, so it was all gentle. It got pretty serious pretty quick, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It was all fun, though. We had a really good time. But those were just my ping pong skills I picked up working at Disney.
So tell me, who won?
Oh, we were keeping score, but...
You want to say you, don't you?
Yeah, I think Eric was better. I think he was taking a little bit easy on me.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Kevin Dart.
Thanks.